Today we're working with widgets, specifically adding this notification that slides in from off-screen to notify the player what area they're in. The notifications are bi-directional and independent of what side the player enters from. The text name is grabbed from an actor in the map and put through to the player's screen. So overall this is pretty simple, so let's get into it. To set up our widget, we first need to have a player HUD set up. So in our content drawer, you can navigate to the blueprint folder in our third-person character and create a widget blueprint. Just going to name this W_HUD. And in the HUD for now, we're just going to drag in a canvas panel. We'll need to attach the HUD to our third-person character, so we can open up that blueprint. And we can get begin play. Then we'll create a widget. We need to get our player's controller. We'll select our W_HUD for our class and promote this to a variable. This will just be our heads-up display. Then we need to add this to the viewport. And now whatever we put in this widget is going to display on our third-person character. To have our slide in text, we can use a text box, an editable text box, or any other text box that you may have from any other project. I'm going to choose editable text because it gives us a bit more options. We can place that onto the canvas, but then we want to place it outside of the canvas. Since this is going to tell us what zone of the map we're in, we're going to call this the zone text box. And under anchors, we want to make sure that it is centered to the center right. Before we start animating this, it's important to have this be in a position where you want it to be. Because much like using the sequencer when we start mapping out the keys, if we try to move this, it's just going to snap back to the position that it was at the first frame of the animation. Other settings like what text is in this box and what color can be changed freely. So once you have it in a position where you want, you can go down to the bottom left and click on our animations. Add a new animation. I'm just going to call it zone text. Then we can click on it. We'll click add. Then we have the option for a zone text box, but we're going to choose the canvas panel slot option, which gives us the option of changing our positioning. We'll click the plus on the track there, and we want to have our layout data offsets. And that will give us the top, left, right, and bottom. And unlike a sequencer, you can't drag and drop the actual text box. We need to just edit these values here. So we can change our left value to have it slide across our canvas. So we'll have it at 0. We can click the plus button in the center of these arrows to add a new key. And we can adjust how long this animation is going to take. I'm going to choose to go a little bit longer than 2.5 seconds. At right before the 1 second mark, I'm going to be dragging the widget in. Going to 175. I'm dragging in slightly more. Then right around 225. Further still. and then right before the end, slightly more. And we'll keep the same key just so we can expand our end. I'm only going to be working with the opacity, so then we can make this fade in and fade out, but when we play it, kind of want to have this zoom in, linger, and then jet out. Then we can click on the plus button for our zone text box, and this gives us all the options that we're able to change. And all we have to do is search for them, so we'll get opacity for our render opacity. At the first frame, we'll start at 0, so it is invisible. Then right as we get up to 3/4 of a second, we'll change it to be fully opaque. And we'll go to 2 seconds, key it again, and at the very end, we'll change it to 0. So if we put in some text here, and we play it, we'll see that it comes up, it shoots out. Good enough. So now we'll need to trigger this from some object in the game and send that information from that object to our third-person character. To handle that, though, we're going to make a new interface. And this is just going to be an interaction interface, so we could just make that BPI interact if you don't already have one. And it's just going to be change HUD text. And it's only going to have one input, which is going to be type text. And this is going to be our HUD text. We'll add that interface under our class settings in our third-person character. And under implemented interfaces, add interact. And we're going to make a new blueprint actor. We'll just call it BP_notify zone. And it's just going to be a collision box. Which we'll place in our map. We'll be using which direction the player passes through this collision box to dictate what our text is going to be. So it's going to work using the dot product, which is going to tell us if our character is facing the same vector as this object. So you know how that's done, we can go into the construction script. And I'm going to make a branch and create a new variable. We'll just call that show arrow. Then we're going to add an arrow component. This way, when you're editing the map, you'll be able to see the direction so there's no confusion. But if you want to have that toggled off, we'll just make that instance editable and expose on spawn to set that yourself. So we'll get our box collision, then we'll get its forward vector. We'll just connect that to the relative transform. And now we can see the arrow pointing directly forward. So it's fairly simple. We'll select our box, and we'll get the event begin overlap. And we're going to do the same for end overlap. We can just do a check to make sure that it is the player character that is overlapping this, just in case you have any other enemies that might go into the zone, so then they don't trigger that. Or when we call the blueprint interface, it goes to some other player that is not the player that overlaps it. So we'll get our player character, put that up with a branch, and we're going to do the same thing for our end overlap. And then either way, we're just going to have a do once. So if our begin overlap is true, we'll go on and send that to our character via interface. And we're not going to do it again until we end the overlap. To get the direction that we're going into, we'll get the box and get its forward vector. And to get the player, we'll just copy the get player character and then get the actor forward vector. And then we'll get the dot product. So this is facing the same direction exactly. It's going to be 1. If it's the opposite direction, it's going to be -1. So we'll just say if it's greater than 0, we'll promote this to a variable. And we'll just call it pass because the character is going to pass through the zone. Then we'll need to add the interface to our notify zone as well. Then we want to take our other actor here. Or we could just copy the get player character. Either way, we're going to get the change HUD text. Since this is bidirectional, we'll have 2 texts, one going to a zone, one coming from a zone. The distinction will be based on our pass variable here, so we'll make a new text. And we'll call it toZone. We want to have it instance editable and expose on spawn. And we're going to do the same thing for a second one. We'll call it from zone. So we'll take our pass, and we're going to select text. If the player is traveling in the same direction of the box's forward vector, we're going to have that be the toZone. And if we're going away, we're going to have that be the from zone. So now we send this information into our third person character. So we'll go to this blueprint here. And we're going to double click on the interface event. And we're going to get our character's HUD. We'll get our zone text box. And then we'll also get our zone text, which was just the animation that we made. For the text box, we can set the text to be what was passed through our interface. And if you wanted to add more to this, you can. If you wanted to have that notify change any information for the, say, color, we can pass that as a new event, or we can have that set in the widget itself, in the player blueprint. Since this is an editable text, we need to get the style, which is a struct. So we can set members in editable text style. And in our appearances, this gives us all the options that we were able to change. We just need to check it. And if you check it and don't connect anything to it, it's going to overwrite the value as blank. So we do already have the render opacity, but we did not change the color and opacity, which are different sections. So we'll add that pin and split the value. We could choose a color for how we want our text to be, and want to change the foreground color to the specific color. We'll just duplicate the HUD so we don't have to draw more strings. We can play animation, and the in animation is going to be the zone text. And we want to check restore state, so when it's done, it goes back to the start, or when we re-loop it, or wherever this ends, or if we start another animation, it will just reset it. I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. We changed the structure, but we need to have this set as the style again. So we'll set style and connect the outstruct. Now when we cross our threshold, it comes in, it says bridge in our blue text. Then when we leave, it's the off ramp. Then back to the bridge, and we go to the off ramp. Fast enough so then the bridge doesn't end the entire animation, but it will restart the next notify. And I'm just going to increase the size of the font. Now we can change the font to be something bigger like 80, but it's going to cut off the entirety of the text. And we could lengthen the text box as you might normally think, but because we already had the animation set, as soon as we click off of that and play the animation again, it's going to go back to what we had as the first key. So we can click size to content to get around that. So now it's not cutting it off, however, it is making the text box very big. So you would just need to go back to the animation and change the left value so then this text box goes out a bit further.
So like I said, pretty simple. Just use the animation sequencer to change what settings you want, and you'll have your game looking more polished as a result. Thank you and shout outs to the Pillar members who supported me on Ko-fi: Winterberry Shark, K Panic, Shay Alexander, and Wolf Paws, and to everyone else who supported me along the way. If you like what I do, if you want free stuff, or you want these projects and exclusive content and more, follow or subscribe to the coffee shop linked in the description. Now that's all I got for you for now, so thank you all for watching, and I hope you've been inspired.